I made a joke and I said, yeah, you know what? If I don't sell any books, maybe I could sell the doll. They have a doll made and put it on Amazon and call it the Denny doll. But
Take a girl and a guy, and they fall madly in love and form a family. Sprinkle in some counseling degrees and a doctorate, a dream of transforming relationships as we know it. And 20 years later, we give you power couple Dr. Ray and Jean Ketkodian. And this is their podcast, Couples Synergy.
And welcome back to another episode of Couple Synergy with Dr. Ray and Jean. Hi, I'm Dr. Ray.
And I'm Jean. And this is our podcast about love, marriage, and relationships.
Please check us out online at couplesynergy.com or on Facebook and Instagram at Couple Synergy. And please subscribe to our podcast, leave us a review, or send us any suggestions on topics you'd like to hear more about. And now on to Couple Synergy, an in-depth look at love, marriage, and relationships, where we bring you our experience helping thousands of couples transform their relationships for over 20 years.
Everyone says you should work on your relationship, but nobody teaches us how. So we've created this podcast to teach people what they can do to create the relationship they've always dreamed of
with the partner they fell in love with. On today's episode, we welcome Carole Slutsky, speaker and author of the book 30, A Mother's Spiritual Journey After Losing Her Child, and also her husband, Denny. Welcome to our podcast, guys. Thank you so much for joining us.
well, thank you for being here. And I want to personally, express my gratitude that we have my husband, Dennis. I call him Denny.
Denny.
So with me, because he's the main character in my book.
And he found out about this about 2 minutes ago. Well, and we're glad to have you here. That's great.
Okay. So why don't you guys tell us a little bit about the two of you? How long have you been together? We'll start there. How long have you been together? And then we'll go into the story about Paula.
Well, we've been together. It'll be 31 years in April. Actually, it's 31 and a half now because we met in about 9 months before we got married. And Carole was divorced for about 5 years, and I was getting divorced. And we met, and her sister actually had a party at her house, and she lived across the street from me, and that's how we met. So anyway, we dated, and then we decided to get married. She was married like 23 years before, and I was married for like 27 years. And we had everything planned to get married in Las Vegas. And about 2 weeks before, one morning, we got the phone call and heard that Paula was in the hospital. So we went to the hospital, and she was like on life support systems. So we were there, and the doctors more or less says they can't do anything for 1 or 2 days about taking her off or on or whatever they were going to do. So basically, we just kind of waited there, and then they told us, we probably should go home. So late that afternoon, we went home, and we had to go back early the next morning. And that's when, my wife ought to maybe say something about what it was then.
Well, when we got back, I knew the first time I saw my daughter when I walked into the ICU unit and went up to her bed. It was just actually like on a TV set. If you saw all this equipment on her, life support with the monitor and everything. Well, the monitor was a flat line, and she had her eyes were dilated, and she's got beautiful blue eyes, and you couldn't hardly see the blue. That the black pupils were so dilated. And I'll tell you, I did not feel her soul. I stressed that in my book because it was important to me. She felt she didn't, there was no life in her, even though her chest was going up and down. It was because of the pump. And I was, my feelings, I was like living in a nightmare. That's all I can tell you. It was like a nightmare. It was like everything was slow motion. And the doctor came in and told us that Paula had 5% chance of making it. And, but it's a state law in Illinois that once you put them on life support, they have to be on for 48 hours. So we managed that day, for that first day that we were there, I had my sisters came and my mother came, and it was shocking for everyone. No one could believe it because she had a pulmonary embolism, and that's a blood clot, and it was like, instant. It was just fast, and she apparently it broke loose when she was in the hospital in the emergency room. And so where Denny left off was the next day we came back to the hospital, and that was the day that they were going to disconnect her, and I had to sign the papers for it. Well, Paula's father, he was also there. Of course, he was, the two between Denny and my first husband, Paula's father, it was just overwhelming. They were out in the hallway, and they were hugging each other, and they were crying together. And I remember that so well, because it was like, it was heartbreaking for me, because I knew Jim that's Paula's dad, that he was hurting, and Denny, he was there trying to comfort Jim. And between the three of us, we got around Paula's bed and we prayed. We started saying Hail Marys and Our Fathers. And I talked directly to God, asked him to do what's necessary. Deep down, I didn't want my daughter to be a vegetable, to remain on that equipment. I had to sign the papers. The doctors said to Jim and I, which one do you want to have signed? And I took the step to sign her off on the equipment. And
how old was Paula?
She was 24 years old, and she was getting married too. That was a little bit down the road in a year. She and her fiance to be were going to be engaged in another couple of months.
And this happened 2 weeks before
we got
going to get married.
Right.
Tell us a little bit more about Paula. When was she born? What was she like?
Well, she was born in 1967. She was 24 when she died. She was 5'7". She had beautiful blue eyes. She was a loving person, and she believed in God. And I'm so, so grateful that she believed in God, because I knew that she was going to pass. I knew she was going to go to heaven. And when she was born premature at 7 months. And she had I had a premature placenta separation. And so Jim and I rushed her to the hospital early in the morning, and it was touch and go. She almost died because that's my dog. Because my placenta, it separated, and she was basically, choking. But they did save her, and we took her home we had her there for about 2 weeks, and then we took her home. And then 20 months later, she started getting very sick, and she was getting a lot of bladder infections. So I was taking her to a pediatrician, and the pediatrician was giving her different various antibiotics, and they would help for a while. But then the fever started. The infections got so bad, and so one night, her fever got to 104, and I got to remember, she's 20 months old. Got to 104. She had a convulsion at home in the kitchen, and I was holding her. We jumped in the car. We got to the hospital, and they put her in. They worked on her, put her in an oxygen tent, and they told me to call a priest. So we did. We called the priest, and he gave Paula her last rites at 20 months old. But I had a miracle happen. She lived through it. The fever broke. The next morning, she was out of danger, the critical list, but she was very weak. And they had her in the hospital again for, over a week. And but she lived. And so I took her back, and she lived for another 22 years with me. And I thank God that I had 2 miracles with her.
And her passing came as a shock. There was no precursor to it at all.
No. Back then we smoked, and I know the generations today, they don't understand why, we smoked. But back then, when I started smoking when I was very young in high school, and so I had that bad habit. Well, my daughter picked up that bad habit. She smoked. So before Paula wound up in the emergency room, she stayed at our at Denny's house. I had just moved in there and I sold my townhouse. So I moved in with him and I was driving Paula home. She came over to go swimming at the house and she stayed for 2 days. And then I drove her home and I said, you know, I was heard gurgling in her chest. And I said, Paula, I said, you've got to stop smoking. And, you know, here's mom, you know, mom's smoking. And I look back and I think that was just so crazy. Did I feel guilty about that? I didn't know that smoking was that bad. Back then, everybody smoked. You smoked in the doctor's office. The doctors smoked. You know, I mean, it was just unbelievable. So, right, he's a retired dentist. So he smoked, maybe he smoked while he was working on patients. I don't know, but
That was in the Army.
yeah. But you know, that's the way it was. And then I had a miracle happen to me to quit smoking, but I'm not going to get into that right now. But that so I said to Paula, stop smoking. And she said, Mom, you know, I'm 24, da 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 da. So I blame the smoking as a culprit. I don't know for sure if it caused it, but it certainly didn't help her health. Now,
And how did Paula and I guess the rest of your children, how did they respond to your relationship with Denny?
well, they liked him. They were very happy. I have another daughter, and they were very happy. They loved their father, but he also was going with someone and planning on getting married. You know, we had been divorced for several years, so they were used to, and they were older. You know, when we got divorced, they were both, you know, in their late teens, 19 or 20. But so they accepted it and they liked him. You know, he was very good to him. And in fact, they liked Jim's future fiance, Barbara. They kind of were like happy about everything. So it was like everything was perfect.
Can you talk about, you know, there's lots of different losses. There's, you can lose your parents, you can lose your siblings, you can lose a child. How is losing a child different than those other types of losses?
Well, my father passed away, of course, way before Paula did. So I lost a parent. I figured out, and it took me many years of going through. Don't forget, I was without Paula for 30 years. And I started realizing a lot of things. I was growing in my faith all this time, and I was figuring out things that have happened, why they happened.
What was it like for you, Denny, to be involved, but still sort of on the outside a little bit?
Well, when we got the call, we got to the hospital, and then after she died, I helped. You know, at the time I thought, oh man, maybe we shouldn't get married right now. But she said, no, let's go ahead, and we did. But
he planned it.
I planned everything because
he helped me.
Grew up in a small town, Illinois, and I kind of knew everybody because I worked in the stores and I was a dentist for a long time and all that stuff. And I knew all the undertakers, everybody. So, you know, I took care of arrangements with everything. And then my daughter even helped. She was a beautician and she even done Paula's hair for the wake and everything else. My ex-wife sang the songs in the church.
It was a small town.
It was a small town, maybe 5,000 or 6,000 people. So everybody kind of knew everybody. So, you know, we went through it, and then we got married a couple of weeks later, and we just started going on. But then a few months later, Carole started getting some problems with her leg, and all the stress of everything, I think, was getting to her physically. So she wound up having a knee replacement, and then like 6 months later, she got MS.
It was like one thing after another. I was basically very, very healthy.
And then the MS she had, but it kind of went into remission after a few years. And in between, she had 4 back fusions.
Wow.
And then another knee. And then after 25 years, the replacement on one of the knees. So she's had a dozen or so operations, then a neck operation here 6 months ago. So it was a lot going on, but, you know, we went through it and wound up, her other daughter had 2 grandkids. And so we were involved helping out with them.
And that was part of
the healing for her, because with the grandkids,
part.
we eventually moved closer to them. And, you know, when they were in sports and school, we're going to all the games and going, and now growing up.
There's something that I realized too, as the years went by. Denny was not Paula's natural father. So at the time of Paula's death, he was sad. He was there for me, but he only knew her for about a year. So it wasn't like as if it was his daughter and he was heartbroken. So he was able to give me what I needed. Every time I would see him, he'd come home from work, I'd say, come and sit down and talk to me. I need to talk to you. Am I going to get better? Am I going to get better? I would tell him about my day, what happened, how I cried, or how I felt. He was there for me. Now, had he been Paula's real father, he would have been so distraught, just like I was, that could he have given to me what I needed? And statistically, both of us heard on the radio about a couple of years ago, and I won't mention the program, but that statistically a mother can die within 10 years after a child's death. That's
Average lifespan.
the average lifespan because of the stress, because of the broken heart. I wound up getting cardiomyopathy. I was diagnosed about 7 years ago with cardiomyopathy, and they can't find out why I got it, but I asked my doctor, could it be from a broken heart? And he said, there is a broken heart syndrome, so that's possible. But that's what death of a child does to parents. It's the worst thing. You don't think about it. You don't even want to think about your child dying. That's before this happened, even though Paula almost died as a little baby, I couldn't even think of her as she was growing that this would happen, because you push that away. That's something that you don't want any part of. And so I do believe that God put Denny in my life to help me, because I don't know if I could have done it without him. Alone, I was divorced. Alone, I don't know if I could have, how long I would have survived.
Yeah, and in addition to the statistics about, mothers, passing soon after their child does, but there is a high statistic of divorce,
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
of
Yes.
Parents.
Thank you for
if they lose
mentioning
a
that.
child as well. So it's a very huge trauma, and it sounded like, Denny, you're right that Denny was put in your life at that perfect time to be that support for you. What was your wedding like? I mean, it's 2 weeks after. That must have been quite an experience for both of you.
Well, we decided we were going to fly to Las Vegas. That's what we planned, and that's what we continued to do. We went to Las Vegas, and we had a couple that were our close friends were standing up with us, so they flew with us, Marge and Herb. And I remember being in the airplane going to Vegas and looking out the window and seeing the clouds. While everyone else was okay, I was like in La La Land. It was like I was on the airplane going to get married. I'm looking out in the clouds thinking of my daughter's in heaven out there, sitting on a cloud looking at me or something. And it was that bittersweet moment of my life. And then I would hold his hand and start talking to him. And then he would bring me back into sanity. He would bring me down from, back into a level mood, because I started suffering from depression too. That's another thing. I had to go on antidepressants for a number of years. And it takes the toll physically on a mother and a father when you lose a child. It just does. And I know
my brother's daughter passed at the age of 19. It's been 8 years. And recently her sister got married, and I saw they're divorced, my brother and his ex-wife. And we were at the wedding, and she was there, and we talked for a while, and she was saying, I often want to talk to her ex-husband, my brother, because who else can she talk about the history and the reminiscing and who her name was Morgan and who Morgan was. And my mom recently lost a child. My brother passed away. It's only been a year, and he was 55 and my mom is 80, but it's still, she aged considerably within weeks of his passing. And, you know, and I told my mom, why don't you go talk to, you know, Morgan's mom, because you guys both lost a child. And I think that is a unique loss that if you haven't experienced it, it's probably unfathomable to figure out what that is and how to go through that.
And, you know, you hit on a good point too, that I like to mention when you said that, you know, do you agree with me that other people, like with your mom, they probably thought your mom should move on, you know, after a year or whatever, you know, start getting better. That's what I thought for me, that my mother, my friends, my sisters, it was like my sister Diane, who lived across the street, she was basically the only one who would listen to me and let me pour my heart out. But it's like other people thought, you know, come on, get your life together. You got to move on. You have to move on. It's, I hate to say this, but it's not like going out buying a new puppy. It just isn't. This
Right.
is you. You know, it's your DNA. This is your baby. This is your child. It's
Can you
God.
talk about that journey from day one of losing her to 30 years later, and how do things shift? And is it sometimes it's like it's just yesterday?
Oh boy, for the first 20 years, I'd say, yeah, I could bring myself right back to that day. I could bring myself back to the phone call I got from the doctor that my daughter was in, you know, ICU, that she had surgery, that she had a pulmonary embolism, that she only had 5% chance to make it. So I could put myself right back in that spot very easy, but I learned how not to. And this is my thanks, my honoring, my love, my faith to God. God showed me how to survive. I started to take care of myself. I started watching what I ate. I remember going to the doctor. I was having all these medical problems. Denny and he helped me. We did select, you know, doctors that were not ready to give you surgery. I started having my back. I started getting degenerative disc disease is what it was. So my spine started going. I'm fused, my whole lumbar is fused. I got 2 metal bars, 12 screws in me. 30 years later, I still have them. So all of that, I still took care of myself. I started by getting out of bed early, 7 a.m. I write this in the book. Don't lay down and look at the ceiling. When you look at the ceiling, you're going to start getting depressed. You're going to start thinking about Paula. I roll out of bed, shower, then make my coffee. And then I started going back to work. I started working. I love art. So I started painting again. So all of these things that I started doing to keeping myself busy, and I was married to a man that he allowed me to do that. He didn't need 24/7 supervision from his new wife. He allowed me to do my own thing because he was doing his own thing too. We were both busy, and we, like in the evening, that's when we met to have dinner. He was able to tell me that I was getting better. And that really, when he was telling me I was getting better, I liked hearing that. I liked that because I really felt somebody sees I'm getting better. You know, I'm going to make it.
Denny, what was that like for you to watch her go through this, and how were you a support to her?
Well, it was, you know, a lot of operations, and she's a real good artist. So she was painting all the time in the daytime, and then she started her own business. So I helped her get along with her business, and between her business and the paint, she stayed busy, and I'd keep going that you can do what you got to do, because, you know, she didn't have to go to work and really make any money because I could afford whatever they needed. So anyway, by doing that, that helped. And then we'd go on some trips, go on a lot of cruises and stuff, different couples and a lot of guys I grew up with, you know, go out with them and their wives. And through the years, everything started getting a little bit better, except, you know, she'd have an operation. Eventually she'd heal up pretty quick. And yeah, and then once the granddaughters came, we moved closer to where they lived, and we were with them all. We actually had a big house, and each one had their own bedroom. and all the goodies, and they kind of lived across the street from us. And as they were growing up, we'd go to all our ball games, because I used to coach Little League for a long time with kids and before I was married with Carole. And so we'd go to all our ball games and everything else, and she kept real busy and was really in with the kids. And so actually, when they were getting older, we moved closer to them. And then
That's why we're here.
and now we moved again. So we're in Florida now because they moved down here.
They moved today.
Yeah.
Can you, I want to ask you this question really quick, because this kind of came up with my sister-in-law. Her daughter is buried in Illinois, and her other daughter now lives in Pennsylvania, and she's hoping to become a grandma, but she's having trouble moving because she feels like she's leaving her daughter that's buried here. What was that like for you, and what was your experience with that?
I didn't feel like that at all.
Mhm.
What I did was, over the course of the 30 years, I had still some of Paula's little momentums that she left. Like she did some ceramic work, and I had some of her ceramics, and I had the bracelets that they cut off of her wrist when they went into surgery. And she used to wear, like 3-4 bracelets. So I had those in a container that my mom gave me for all those years. And there were certain items, and when we came to move here, I told Denny, I said, Denny, some of these items here, they're not going with us. They got to stay here. And we saw a miracle at the miraculous icon of Cicero. And that's in my book. I'm not going to get into that, but we went there, we witnessed the icon of Blessed Virgin Mary and Jesus that was painted, and her tears. You can go online, look up the miracle in Cicero, Illinois. And we went there, and that's another experience that got me, that was
buried
just,
all the stuff.
I said, we're burying some of these items here in our house that we were at. In the backyard, we had a couple of rose gardens. So I that's what we did. We buried some of the things, a lot of things that I had. I left them there. Those were supposed to remain there. And we had Q-tips from the Virgin's tears that I buried there too. I said, no, I can't take them out of the state. They got to stay here. So as far as what you just asked me, did I feel leaving her? It's basically leaving the cemetery there, leaving the coffin, leaving.
Well, yeah, but let me tell you why. I can tell you why it wasn't so hard. Was we got a mausoleum where she's in, and we got
But still
space in
leaving
the
the,
mausoleum too. So when we go, we're going to go back to Illinois.
we're gonna be
and-
buried there too.
Buried there. Her daughter's there, her sister's there, my mom, dad, aunts, uncles, everybody. So we're going to be in one big place, So it's a little easier when you're going to be heading back there.
But I know what you asked. I know what your sister's feeling. All she's got to do is close her eyes and picture where she's at, her daughter's at. I do that. I close my eyes and I could picture driving into the cemetery. I could picture parking the car. I used to walk around. I didn't just go into the mausoleum to see Paula. I'd walk around and I would look at all the grave sites, and I would see the dates. There were so many young people that were buried there, so many in their 20s that were buried there. When we would go on vacation, where did I ask you to take me? We would be on vacation, different places. I said, we found cemeteries. Can you believe that one? We would drive through cemeteries. I would walk and I would look at the headstones, and I would look at the dates. And so many were 24 years old, 26. And so that went on for quite a few years too, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Actually, Gene and I do that. Gene and I do that also.
You do that?
Yeah,
You do-
actually
you
on,
do.
on
Visit
vacations.
cemeteries.
and-
What is that? Why do we
Yeah.
do that? Why? I mean, it's like,
Well, I used to like to see the oldest date
Yeah.
there.
but with
Yeah.
me, I was
In
looking.
our hometown, some were in the late 1700s they were
Right.
born, it's unreal.
What was
But
really pivotal for us was when we visited northern France, and there were soldiers' cemeteries.
Well, we used to go
the
to,
young.
in El Paso, Texas, where I was in the Army, they had a big graveyard there, and we used to go by there.
We went there. Yeah, he took me there. Yeah, so many.
And you can
stuff.
see by the dates, like a whole
Mhm.
bunch died this day,
Oh,
a couple days after, and then nothing, and then another.
Do you think
battles.
that's part of the healing process. It's knowing that your child is not the only one that died.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? Is death really that bad? If you go to heaven, isn't it supposed to be wonderful?
Can you talk about why you named the book 30 and why, how the book came to be?
Well, I really thought about writing the book maybe about 20 years later after Paula passed. I thought about writing because now you got to remember my granddaughters are starting to get older. My other daughter's starting to get older. My other daughter has a lot of friends. Well, I wound up getting to know her friends, and a couple of them had lost their children, a son or a daughter. They came to me and hugged me. I would go to the wake and they would hug me. Why? Because they knew I understood. You understand.
Mm-hmm.
They understood that they would hug me, and I would tell them immediately, it's going to get better. Get through this. Take one day, 1 hour right now at a time. Get through this funeral. Get through the wake. Don't look towards the future, just today, because that's how raw it is.
For our audience, where can someone get a hold of your book, if they wanted more information about the story?
Okay, well, just go to Amazon and put my name in, Carole Sluski. That's CaroleSluski. You could put the name of the book in 30, but with my name, it should pop up. And it's only been out there for 2 months, so it's just in a baby state. And I'm working real hard. That's why I'm doing podcasts, because I want to get the word out there. My word to moms and dads, or anyone, husbands, wives, if you love your deceased husband or your deceased wife, there's hope. You could live again. You could be happy, but you have to pray, ask God to help you, and He will help you. And you've got to do things for yourself. You have to fight this. You can't let that sadness and that grief take you over. Grief is a killer. So you have to do something that you like to do. I even suggest make a new recipe for the family. And another thing, your family. Okay, how many of you have other children? How many? I had another daughter. I didn't push my daughter away, but I had to be careful with her because I didn't want to make her just do everything for me. She still got her own suffering. She lost her sister. So, but one thing I could say, she helped me by being there when I needed her. And boy, when she became a mother, she said, Mom, you want to take the girls, go ahead and do what you want to do. She said, and a lot of daughters don't let your mother take the kids, but we took them on 2 trips when they were a little older, but we took them on cruises. We took them to the zoo. I took them to dancing, acting. That filled the hole. So my suggestion is this: if you are fortunate that you have other children, you put your life into those kids. That's what your deceased child wants you to do, because they're brothers and sisters, and that DNA is there. And boy, I'll tell you, it is strong. Love and family is so strong. Your family can pull you through. I also suggest you get together for a family dinner. Say a little prayer in the beginning for your deceased child. Keep your child that's gone to heaven in the little family circle. I talk about the family circle a lot. Okay, first there's God, then there's your husband or wife, and then there's your children, then there's your mom and dad, and then there's your sisters and brothers, and then there's your friends. So that's the circle of life to me. That's my circle. Like other people might have a different circle, but that's my circle. And that's the way I knew that I had a backup. I had people that would help me.
So we always end our podcast with this question. And so Denny, I'm glad you're here for this one. What is it that your partner does that they love you?
Can you answer that?
You gotta
No.
asking you. Oh, me?
For both of you.
Oh, okay.
Well, I love her because the way she is, you wouldn't know it with all the operations and everything else. She's like the bionic woman. She's going to be 79 years old in a couple of months. I'm going to be 83, and we got along good for 31 years. And, we like the same things. And I don't paint, but I love the artwork. And, it's been great so far. I love the grandkids. We're going to be great grandparents next week.
That's
So
awesome.
that's even one more step up. So great grandparents, and parents, man, it's kind of neat, so that's basically it.
You could ask me now.
Yeah.
Why do I love him?
Yeah.
God gave me a good one. He gave me a keeper, and not that we don't argue. We've had, I've really had some explosions too. Some bad ones.
She's Russian.
Yeah, I'm half Russian, so I got a temper. But well, even you've got a temper too.
I'm part Russian too.
I'm Russian too. Oh, we're still the old timers on that nationality thing. But he's there for me. When I wanted to move here, he didn't want to go. And I had to really manipulate him, but I got him to move. And when we got here, I had second thoughts about moving because I'm starting to miss my sister. And he was in the hot tub and he said, I told you we should do this a long time ago. So he wound up liking it better than I did. And but now I love it. But he's just a good person, a good man. I mean, not just to me, but he's good to my family, my other daughter, the granddaughters, that's grandpa, I mean, they call him brother, they call me. So he's just a good guy. In fact, in the book, I go to Bible class. So I had some of the women read my manuscript. The first 6 months I wrote. It took me 16 months to write this book. So I passed out my manuscript and I said, read it and let me know what you think about it. So I got critiqued and everything. And, you got to talk a little bit more about this and that. And I had one woman say to me, man, she said, I would like to find a Denny. So I made a joke and I said, yeah, you know what? If I don't sell any books, maybe I could sell a doll, may have a doll made and put it on Amazon and call it the Denny doll. But
well, Carole and Denny, we want to thank you so much for being on our podcast. This has been a really wonderful story.
Well, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
And this has been an exceptional for me. I'm usually alone.
People have been sharing stories since the beginning of time to bond and heal and grow. And we hope by you guys sharing your story, it's enriched your lives and the lives of our listeners.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
We want to thank all of you for joining us today on Couple Synergy. Our passion is in helping couples and people have happy and healthy relationships. And this podcast gives us a fun way of bringing our knowledge and expertise to you, our listeners. For all of you listening, please let us know how you enjoyed the show. If you have any questions, comments, or topic suggestions, please email us at contact@couplesynergy.com. For more information about Couple Synergy and our programs such as Relationship 101, the home study course, the Couples Weekend Intensive, and our premier coaching program called Couple to Couple, look us up online at couplesynergy.com.
And if you know someone who could benefit from this episode, please download it and share it. And thank you for listening.
Until next time, synergize your life and synergize your love.
You have been listening to Couple Synergy with Dr. Ray and Jean Ketkodian. Couple Synergy was recorded, edited, and produced by Dr. Ray and Jean Ketkodian. Voiceover and music entitled Breathe and Let Go was recorded and composed by Gina Gonzalez.